Chapter 8. Intrusion. We get another chapter that returns to Evan's house. While thankfully this is not another exposition dump like the previous 2 chapters that cut away, this chapter does 2 awful things. The long and short of this chapter is that someone seems to start scoping out Evan's house to steal from it, and his family has to deal with it. Anyways, the 2 things. The first is this is when the real examples of sexism kind of rear its ugly head. And it makes, because somehow in Bird's mind, it makes complete sense that a mother would strap her 14-year-old son up with his father's gun and then send him out into potential danger rather than attempting to do things for herself and keep the danger off her son. And I'm not exaggerating here. These are actual quotes from the book.
I'm so busy with the girls. I would like you to be my security guard. Here's one of your dad's 45s along with 3 magazines. If anything happens, you're my bodyguard, okay?
Now you might say, I'm not a mother, so I wouldn't be able to accurately guess this. Well, to prove you wrong, I asked the mothers of my family what they thought about this. Okay, so I'm 14 years old. Society has collapsed around us. A sketchy-looking van is outside, clearly casing our house to steal from it. Do you strap yourself with a gun and go out and lock the door? Or do you strap me, your 14-year-old child, with a gun?
Probably me. I'm not gonna give you a gun.
But you're a woman, Mom.
What's that got to do with Christy in China?
So yeah, you heard it here from the horse's mouth. That's some grade A traumatic childhood BS right there. The second thing I want to talk about is how this chapter effectively shows how pointless Chapter 4 was. So if you remember, not too long ago, I believe in my first section of this review, I talked about how Chapter 4 was basically a giant exposition talking about how overly prepared Evan was. His guns, his plans, his fortifications. And yet, despite all that doomsday talk, the first time we hear anything about the Vandergriffs, who in the next chapter revealed to be part of this plan the entire time from a few years ago, we're just now learning about them as they become important to the story. Oh, and trust me, they're only here so Bird can write his amazing fight scene later near the end, before Evan and Jason show up and have literally no personality beyond being Evan's friend, which means he's a fellow local guy who believes everything Evan does, and being ex-military, which has become code real fast in this book for, you're a good guy. I'm not joking. Every single good person in this book is ex-military. There's no non-ex-military in here beyond Peggy that is not in some way married to or ex-military themselves. Chapter 9. Reinforcements. This chapter is literally just the exposition dump explaining how Evan met Vandergriff, containing some more well-loved racism, this time against Turkish people, and continuing the trends that heroes can never ever be in the wrong and must always 100% be in the right, because nothing is more interesting than a Mary Sue flat character. Chapter 10. A Time for Action. A time for action? What? You've been shooting everyone you come across. So Chapter 10 returns us to Evan and Jason as we come to the DHS closing in on their position. Though Evan and Jason note that even with the stolen guns from the previous agents that they murdered with them, the big giant gun on the DHS truck will shred them to pieces if they got into an actual fight. However, since our heroes can face no true obstacle, the guy that they armed in Chapter 7 opens fire on a DHS agent somewhere else in town, and these agents quickly leave to respond as backup. Evan gets pissy, though, when they're leaving, and he hears them refer to him and the guy later as insurgents. Which, Evan, to be perfectly pedantic, do you actually know what the word insurgent means? Because you are by definition insurgents right now. No, not really. In this instance, it's just a conservative buzzword used so Evan and Jason can spout about all the poor, innocent groups that are going to be victimized by the awful government currently in charge, such as Christians, the NRA, libertarians, Tea Party conservatives, and so on. You know, all those groups that have been famously put down and victimized. After that, they immediately secure a paddle boat from a nearby yacht club and then paddle out to Damon's boat, ending the chapter by deciding to all take a nap. You know, literally a couple hours ago, as far as I'm aware, they had just woken up from sleep. Bird really has no idea how to give the reader a consistent time, because it often feels like the characters will wake up, shout some political talking points, and then go back to sleep. I'm not joking. There are times where I've had to be like, wait, what? They're already going back to sleep? It's been like a few minutes, as far as I'm aware. Chapter 11, By the Sea. This chapter begins with Evan waking up after a long nap, drinking coffee with Damon and Jason, including another laugh around the water cooler moment. They kill time effectively until nightfall, where Damon reveals a pair of M1 Grand rifles to replace their flimsy ARs during the duration of the boat ride to Delaware. And they head off just as Manhattan explodes into a massive ball of fire. Our heroes ruminate the horror of the world for a moment before Damon starts them off, and this has been another pointless diversion. I will give this chapter some credit, though. It has the one scene I unironically chuckled at.
"What's wrong, Evan?" questioned Damon. "Oh, I thought you were my wife making breakfast," said Evan in a deflated tone. "Hell, I thought you'd have better taste than that to be able to mistake me for her," Damon said as he chuckled to himself.
Yeah, I laughed with the book this time instead of against it. Sue me. After that, they take to the sea for a bit. Evan and Jason take another nap while Damon continues to drive the boat. You know, when the collapse of society comes, I want to be able to sleep as often as these guys do. I'm just putting that out there. However, not too long afterwards, they're attacked by another boat, forcing Evan and Jason to take up defensive positions and fight them off. Why does this boat attack? I don't know. Now, this particular section contains something very notable. Something that you wouldn't notice the first time around, but will notice afterwards, once you finish the book. Are you ready? You sure? Okay. Here we go.
He resumed firing, and a blast of fiberglass flew into his face as a round impacted the hull of the Mother Washington, just inches from where he was firing from the prone position.
Congratulations! You just read the one and only scene in this entire book where our main characters suffer any form of injury or struggle. This, officially and objectively, is the point where Evan struggles the most in the entire book. He suffers nothing more beyond this. And this kind of ties into the point I've been sniping at the entire time with this review. Evan and Jason don't struggle. They have practically everything handed to them on a silver plate. They always make the right decision. Their way of thinking is the only right way. And if you don't think like them, you're either misguided or evil. They don't even struggle mentally beyond some lip service about how worried they are about their families. Oh, and trust me, they aren't as worried as they pretend they are, but we'll get into that later. Trust, it's coming up. Basically, these characters are Mary Sue's, right down to being the author avatars, because there's no difference between Jason and Evan. And they ruin any sort of suspense or tension the story might have because of it. They're over-congratulated for even the most simple of things. They're always handed their past to move on easily. This is literally the only time even they suffer a slight injury of any kind. Anytime any injuries happen to them, anytime. And trust me when I say, even though they talk about how Evan needs to keep his eye bandaged up and away from seeing stuff, never comes up again. You will forget he is injured by the end of the book. Moving on, they manage to fight off the boat, but not before Damon takes a couple shots and dies. And though Bird really wants you to feel something, the way he words these next few sentences, it's kind of hard to. Even putting aside the fact that Damon is as much of a heel as Evan and Jason, Bird tries to give him this dramatic death. But in this case, less wasn't more. We go from finding out that he's wounded to Damon dying within 4 sentences, which is nowhere near the right time in this scenario. And trust me, Bird really thought this was a tragic, awful scene to read, as it becomes clear later on as Evan and Jason constantly talk about how much of a hero Damon was and how sorry they are he died. And now, despite the tragic death of the main character, Bird decides this isn't good enough to enter the chapter on, because the chapters following the New York crew have to be long as sin. Anyways, Jason and Evan wrap Damon's body in a tarp, put him in his bed, crank up the AC with the intention of getting his body back to his brother in Delaware, and they quickly continue on. Evan receives some minor first aid, i.e. he tears off a piece of his shirt and wraps it around his face.
You're hit. You're bleeding, man.
I ain't got time to bleed.
Oh. Okay.
Then before long, another boat comes after them. However, there's a difference about this boat. This boat is friendly. How do we know? Because one of the occupants is ex-military. Anyways, despite showing super paranoia about everyone else, including later on when a boat just tries to approach them and they threaten to shoot the pilot, they pull over to help this boat for some reason. Turns out this boat contains Bill and Judith, who escaped Manhattan before it exploded. However, in the madness, Bill forgot his heart medication and ended up having a heart attack, with Judith driving around to find help. When brought aboard and asked how they got here, we get a 3-page backstory about her and Bill's life story up until this point when they met the group. It's just like, this is useless information. It's just dumped on top of you in what I will graciously call a clunky attempt to make you immediately feel bad for these people. As if a man having a heart attack in the middle of the apocalypse while his wife struggles to find him some help isn't good enough. I'm good. Anyways, after that long expo dump, the group continues on their way. We get more clunky political bullshit, another laugh about around the water cooler moment, this stupid comment. Oh, here we go. I guess I'm riding shotgun, or rather, assault rifle. Evan looked at him and said, "Oh, come on, don't call the AR that. When a soldier has one, it's a service rifle. When a cop has one, it's a patrol rifle. But if a citizen has one, it's an assault rifle. What the heck? Citizens do a lot less assaulting than the other two aforementioned groups." Putting aside the fact that AR stands for Armor Light Rifle, an assault rifle doesn't suddenly stop being an assault rifle because a cop or a soldier is using it. It's still an assault rifle. They just refer to it differently to make it sound more official. It's like the difference between calling a pistol a sidearm or a service weapon. Neither of them stop that from being a pistol. Anyways, they eventually arrive in Delaware Bay, where they threaten to shoot another boat that tries to come up to them for help, because I'm guessing the drivers went ex-military. Anyways, they eventually arrive in Delaware Bay, where they are greeted by the townfolk and quickly get a hold of Jim Rutherford, Damon's brother, and tell him of Damon's death. We get a dazzling display of hypocrisy, where it's wrong for anyone to even think about taking our hero's snacks, but it's considered heroic and perfectly fine that an ER nurse stole a shitload of hospital supplies during a state of emergency for her own family's use. This is also where you notice that if Bird wants a character to be sad, still be seen as a badass, he will always, and I mean always, have the character say something and then wipe a single tear from his eyes.
Those some manly tears, okay? Those some manly ass tears right there that you looking at.
Also, despite the main character's constantly repeated desire to get home as soon as possible due to the world literally burning around them, they decide that they owe it to Damon and Jim to stick around for 2 days so that they can have a funeral for Damon. Yeah, because that's real important right now. Your families might be dead, but you know, the guy you've known for a total of 3 days is worth this massive delay. And the chapter even ends with Jim inviting our great heroes to lunch. The only nice thing I have to say about this chapter is that one line that made me unironically laugh with the book. Chapter 12, Friendship Through Fate. The next chapter starts simply. They wake up, have breakfast, get a massive expose dump on everything that's happened in the U.S., which includes someone poisoning water supplies to cities, which I guess is important for later. I mean, other than a nitpick, really, it's not that much. And then, of course, Bill dies off screen. In addition, we continue the trend of our heroes never having to suffer or struggle or anything. As Jim decides, since that old bastard's gone, the heroes can trade him Bill's boat, and he'll give them his plane to fly home with. The author pretends there's an actual debate here, as our heroes don't want to give away Judith's retirement plan, despite the fact that, her husband's dead and society as she knows it is collapsing all around her, therefore retirement is completely pointless. Beyond that, the heroes get in contact with their families over the ham, which is pretty much just to tell us everything we've already read in previous chapters, so it's a pretty boring section. We also get more examples of birds. Let's be nice and call it writing.
The pastor of the church the Rutherford family regularly attended presided over the simple, yet fittingly beautiful ceremony.
After Jason was done, Evan made his call, and right on schedule, Molly was right there waiting. They also shared a special, emotional moment.
Also, there's a slight continuity tiff in here, where they leave Jason alone to talk to his family, then immediately come back in and describe his expression after talking to his family, and then we just go straight into the conversation with his family in real time. It's confusing as, again, sin.
Bruce, Jim, and Evan stepped out of the room for a moment to give him some time to talk to his family in private. When they came back in, Jason was all smiles. He said, "Have you heard from Molly?"
After that, Evan and Jason return to Jim's. Judith agrees to trade off her boat to give them their plane, and she agrees to go with the main heroes. There is a ceremony for Damon, and our group sets out the next day to get the plane. However, along the way, they pass several refugees. And as they pass, one of the refugees attempts to force them to give up some food so he can feed his kids. So they shoot him dead, speed off, and then mock him for not being a real man. No, I am not joking.
Society has trained the provider out of a lot of men. In my opinion, any man who can't provide for his family in a physical way, like hunt, fish, or whatever it damn well takes, isn't a man. He's merely an adult male. We've got way too many adult males and not nearly enough men these days.
You're all pieces of shits. Anyways, this gives us a clear view of the reason that Judith came with us. It's so that Bird can provide the group with another weak, defenseless woman for our heroes to protect as time goes on, which furthers the point in this book that this book is sexist as hell. Every woman introduced so far is a housewife who can't handle any dangerous situation without the support of her big, strong husband or another man. And I'm not joking. That is literally every female written in this book. Like I said, in Bird's mind, it's more appropriate for a young boy to protect the household with a gun than a grown adult woman. But we'll get to that.